Okay, yeah. Hello everyone. Welcome to the second webinar from us, Manna Insect. If you didn't know or didn't catch, we had one webinar before this in about a month ago for introducing BSF and the basics of insect-based business and all the terminology and all that. And if we will send you a link to that webinar as well, if you're interested. In this webinar, our plan is to deep dive more into practical learnings of both BSF rearing and especially what kind of applications we've seen, what works and what doesn't work, and what kind of metrics you can expect from different cases. And please let us know in the questions also. We'll have the same principle format that we will do about 45-minute presentation, and then it leaves us 15 to 25 minutes for the questions. My name is Yka Marinen. I'm CEO and founder of Manna Insect. My background is engineering, so I had to learn the hard way of BSF rearing and breeding. We operate here in Finland, in Lapland, where we live, and it's currently it's -10, but it was last week -20 Celsius, so it can go from -30 to +30 Celsius. So this is the environment we've been learning how to do rearing and breeding. And our background is on small scale. So what I call small scale is up to 100 tons of upcycling bio-waste in a month level. So we've done it in greenhouses, in micro level, in on-site, in fields and farms and so on. So our background is not like centralized big facilities, but from smaller local cases. And I'd like to introduce my colleague Saverio. He can continue a little bit on his background and we'll get started. Thank you for joining.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. And I'm Saverio Danupio, Italian industrial biotechnologist, specialist in the development of sustainable solutions. And I will be glad today to introduce you to this webinar, where we will explore a little bit more about the black soda flies. So why people are interested in the black soda flies and what are the motivations behind it? There is a huge push into the development of alternative to the animal feed. We know that animals need of carbohydrates and of protein feed source, and the main protein source comes from soy. Soy is farmed everywhere around the world, but it's abundant and exported only from South America mainly. So this makes a condition that sometimes allow everybody to get the proper feed, some other times it's not. And in these terms, black soda fly represents a very unique alternative to this protein source for animal feeding. We as humans, but also as farmers, generate a lot of bio-waste, a lot of manure that can impact in terms of emissions, in terms of pollution, and in terms also of incubator for diseases. And overall, this phenomenon, it costs also a lot of money. So the reduction of the organic matter made by insects, it's an alternative that cannot be negligible, and that in the reality is very efficient, especially with the black soda flies. The possibility that the insect give in terms of developing new businesses in terms of decentralizing, because most of the time the management of the organic matter is realized by big plants with heavy and expensive hardware. But with the use of black soda flies, it's possible to go the other way around, to create a new legion of new small entrepreneurs that also in rural area can play their part. And in the web, YouTube, but also other channels show that there are I don't know, numberless cases of people that are actually changing their business, changing their life, and generating profit or generating benefits for the community. As always happens when something is creating traction, when something is actually of a general interest and is of a bright future, investment comes. And this is also with the black soda fly that is nowadays collecting millions of investments in big companies. But I have seen lately also in middle and small startup operating with black soda flies.
Yeah, so here we want to go more into concrete examples, and this is having multiple telcos with people who are very enthusiastic, but still at the very beginning. There are few challenges and caveats that have to go through, and one, of course, is the local legislation, and I would say that there's three types of countries in this area. One is that there is no legislation at all, anything goes. In many cases, there's no real control. Then there are areas where there's some parts legislation and some parts not, like how to use it for animal feed, what are substrates can be used. And then there are let's say the Western environment, typically like European Union and such, where there's a very specific legislation that compares insects, especially black soda fly larvae, as rearing chickens or pigs. And that is kind of like I would say over bureaucratic legislation, but that's what we have. And in all these environments, you have different options what you can and cannot do depending on your biowaste sources. So, for example, in African contexts where we have many cases, and in some other contexts like in Indonesia, you can even upcycle animal manure to animal feed and fertilizer. And of course, in these areas, the food production in itself is important, not just the sustainability purpose, but to be able to produce food even in conditions where plant growing is not that feasible. But if you think about the more Western context and these bigger facilities, and what you hear in the news mainly is these centralized plants, and their typical application is pet food ingredient, which I think it's now the main industry in these cases. And you can see already a lot of pet food companies promoting insect-based products. When we have also seen, and we've worked ourselves with waste companies and actually accepted bio-waste for a fee to handle, compared that, I think in EU at least, there's a law that by 2025, 2026, 100% of bio-waste has to be recycled and it cannot go to any more dump sites. So there's possibilities to actually accept bio-waste and handle that as a business and use larvae to eat it as much as possible, even if you don't know you cannot sell it in any form. We have also seen, and I've actually visited many chicken farmers that have their own black soda fly rearing, and their main motivation is to save costs from soy meal. So instead of purchasing soy meal, they actually rear their own black soda fly larvae, and they save costs by using the larvae themselves, and typically live to chickens. Then there are new emerging business, which is very exciting in this space because we are still at the beginning of this industry, is that actually there is a lot of potential to specialize in selling just the eggs or neonates for other smaller or bigger companies, and especially to small BSF growers. It's very efficient if one can provide eggs and neonates, and then the other focus on rearing them and utilizing them. And this is practically an opportunity in everywhere in the world, what we see. And then there are, especially I've seen in Asia, companies that start to specialize in the post-processing the larvae into a more higher quality and higher end products to cosmetics and medicine, and extracting different value from the larvae than just purely for animal feed. And also not to forget that because of Ukraine war and these global chains being disrupted, just upcycling larvae to fertilizer has become a real business opportunity, and that again is available for everyone in practice.
Okay, so what are the goals and purpose of different scales? Let's say first of all that with black soda fly it's possible to create a small business or a huge business at every scale. This is not always possible with the other kind of businesses. With black soda fly, it is, and according to the size of the business, then it is more appropriate to have a certain approach, a certain level of equipment. For example, there are many small businesses that maybe are invisible because they work so locally that basically they serve themselves or they serve the neighbors, and they work with the low tax system where from the crate, and everything starts from one crate. So we put the substrate, we put usually the 5 days old larvae, and then we make sure that we have the right conditions. And then often happens to create a stake where you have different crates, and you can reduce the size and the space. So it starts low tech, it starts with the no post processing, and then it scale ups. And the higher becomes the production, the more is justified the use of expensive and complex tools, and also the open of new division like the post-processing. And from the slide, we can see that it goes straight away, and it gives the possibility actually to entrepreneurs to start with almost no budget, and then to ideally become hundreds of tons of protein production company.
Yeah, so like I mentioned at the beginning, that our approach and where we come from is on a small scale, on-site solutions and rearing and breeding. And I don't want to too much, let's say, I see the value of these centralized big facilities, but I don't think, or we don't think that they really utilize the big potential of BSF. One reason is that when we talk to people all over the world, the big challenge with animal growers is the cost of feed and availability of feed, and the price we compare is to soy meal, and soy meal is about $500 to $700 per ton. And currently, when you have a large global facility, you have a lot of middlemen and then a lot of logistics, and that price currently what I've heard from different locations and sources, it's from $2.50 to even $6 a kilo. So several thousands of dollars per ton. So it's not a feasible possibility for the animal growers. And also one reason is that because there's a very high end post-processing which consumes energy, which increases the cost. And the good thing about the potential of the BSF is that you can actually feed it live as well, especially to chickens. So you can even utilize it without any post-processing when you do it locally. And also that many places you want to promote local production and local independence, which of course in a large facility you are in a global market. So again, a smaller scale, even micro scale, is more applicable to distribute in these areas and become more independent on the imports of the feed. And this, unfortunately, in a large centralized facility, you can't provide them, especially in developing countries. Also, the growers typically need some tons of the higher quality animal feed to replace soy and fish meal. So it's practically impossible to go to a larger facility to ask and buy some tons of. You immediately need to buy hundreds of tons to make sense. And I think the last but still a very important part of this is that the bio waste is very distributed all over the world. And if we want to really utilize different substrates and bio waste in a centralized facility, in a big facilities, the challenge is that you typically need very homogeneous food for the insects, and thus you're not able to really utilize all the available bio waste from restaurants and manure and all these kind of things. So this is where we see that the small scale, local, decentralized model actually very much complements and utilize the BSF in their full potential.
How to make a living with insect farming in small scale? There are different opportunities for young leader entrepreneurs. And as we mentioned before, black soda fly is an excellent substitute of the soy protein meal. And you can produce it locally, and you can even provide it alive, fresh. It's not a mistake to use fresh feed. Actually, it has some advantages. Feeding to the animals fresh feed instead of dried meal, it's in many cases an advantage. The price, obviously, when you sell smaller quantities, it goes higher. And we report here $0.6 per kg of live larvae, but I can guarantee you that according to the situations and the agreements with the farmers, you can go upper to this price without difficulties. The frass, the residues from the black sword flies is rich in nitrogen, in phosphor and potassium, and it's an ideal land supplement, especially when there is intensive agriculture. As always, it's hard to define a price because when you go smaller, it's really the last mile that makes the price. But we give as an ideal cost you can sell the frass is $2 per kg. The larvae can be also reutilized inside your own business because eventually you're not creating a value with the larvae, but with your final product that can be a chicken, can be a pig, can be any other kind of animal, especially the fish. In the fish farming, we are seeing a real revolution. substituting the soy meals, but also the fish meals, which most of the time are really unsustainable. And well, black swordflies maybe are not equal to the fish meals, but from the sustainability point of view, we should always go for black swordfly. And so you can save money reducing the cost of feed supplying. Uh, Selling the black swordfly larvae to these exotic pet shops or to people that own many of these animals. It's a very interesting business, maybe niche, but when you find your customers, I can guarantee you that the added value that you can charge on little portion, sometimes even of 20, 30, 50 grams each order, are high. And so in this way, you can generate high revenue with little investment and little labor. Eggs. Everybody is talking about black swordfly, but in most of the cases, it's easy to rear black swordfly. It's a little bit more complex to breed the black swordfly. So those who have the expertise and the right environment for breeding black swordfly can make a business uniquely related to the eggs. Everybody can obtain eggs from you, and the cost, it starts from $1 a gram, but can be a lot higher, especially if you then decide also to make your eggs hatching and to raise the neonate larvae, or to sell directly the 5 days old larvae. You can also decide to go in another interesting business, like the reduction of special organic matter that it's been contaminated. So then your business model reflects a different condition. You get paid for processing these organic waste. It's not always possible. Sometimes you can kill your larvae, but in most of the cases, the black swordfly operate an appreciable reduction of those kind of pathogens, or those kind of toxins, or also some kind of pollutants. But then we will see through the next webinar eventually. And you can also sell your larvae dried or frozen. And in this way, when the processing company reach the proper quantity, can process it and can obtain high added value products like cosmetic, like medical, and so on. And in this case, also, you can generate high profit.
Yeah, so this slide is also from our previous webinar, and just visually highlights that the possibility in a smaller scale and on-site is, and even like a single entrepreneur case, is that when you are very flexible and you have many possibilities regarding what kind of biowaste sources you are able to find locally, that you can then convert that into either value in the input or output side. So if you have a high cost, high nutritional substrate source, you can convert that into a high quality both larvae and frass, where you get the income. And then if you have a lower quality bio waste, you can convert that to a lower quality but still a income for larvae and frass, or even decide that you only do frass. And then the third option is that you focus on income from a very let's say challenging bio waste that people are willing to pay for you to get rid of, where you either have cost on the getting rid of the larvae and frass, or then you have ability to convert that into a frass. Or one of the new areas is that you can even convert that into an energy source using the fat as a basis for biodiesel and so on. So what we believe that in this, especially in a smaller scale, you're not stuck with one model, but there's many flexibilities on depending on your input of different substrates you have availability or available.
What are the challenges in getting into insect business? Before we said that rearing black soldier fly is relatively easy, that you can start with a very micro scale, but there are still difficulties, and it's good to keep that in mind. Available bio-waste sources. In general, we assume that in every country, in every region, there is a bio-waste availability. But it's important to make sure that this bio-waste matches your criteria of black soldier fly larvae farming, that is available in the right quantity, in the right conditions, and all year round. The frequency, in my opinion, is the most important factor, because some kinds of bio waste are available, are seasonal, and you cannot rely on this kind of on and off source of bio waste, because you want your business to be steady, to have not an overproduction or to go down and maybe you have an order to run. Another aspect, your bio-waste source should not come from too far. And this is also regarding the product delivery. Local is always better. You reduce the cost, you reduce the inconvenience, and in this way, you make circular. Promoting the circular economy logic is always beneficial in terms of business robustness, in terms of also feedbacks from the local community. Another aspect is the feed conversion rate. Sometimes you have availability of an organic waste source that you don't know exactly how efficient can be. Let's take the example of zucchini. Yeah, well, you can have a mountain of zucchini, but if you assume that maybe they are 99% water and that 1% is cellulose fibers, more or less. I'm not exactly sure of what can be the percentage, but you understand that with these numbers, you basically are giving no nutrients to your black soldier fly larvae. So make sure to plan your black soldier fly business on an organic matter source that reflects what are your needs. Reading and breeding experience. Unless you are hiring 10 years, 5 years experience black soldier fly operator, try to be always humble and to move step by step. Sometimes rearing black soldier fly can be easy, but when especially you want to farm them all year round, the seasonality in some areas change completely all the factors, and from easy it can become very complicated. Selling the larvae and the frass locally, as mentioned before, for the waste source, try to promote your local market. It's always better. Understanding the local legislation. Every continent, every country, and sometimes even every region has its own rule. Try to stay in your circle also for understanding completely what are your possibilities and what are the legislative restrictions. Investment costs and infrastructure and business risk. Luckily, today is going much better than before. And there are grants, there are investors that have open eyes. But you always have to start, you always have to demonstrate that your model is winning. So we suggest to do it and to demonstrate that you are actually a respectable businessman.
We like to in this regarding the previous slides to also remind that there are ways to calculate the costs, and we as Manna we've given in our website there is a calculator for, especially in this small scale level, to calculate the main cost, because that again is something that is unless you've done it, it's very hard for you to estimate the cost of investments and the capacity and running costs. But in principle, we also promote that that you should start in micro scale and even outdoors if that's possible in many environments, and start small and get your hands dirty and learn. But eventually, if you want to do it professionally and you want to have a stable production that is scalable, unfortunately, you need to invest into a climatized spaces for rearing and breeding, and that there is a cost to that. There are many ways to do that, and then you need to invest into a level of pre and post processing equipment. And in this case, the post processing equipment is really related to what kind of customers are you having and what do they require. If your customer is a chicken, he's happy with directly eating live larvae, so you need minimal post processing, you need a vibrating sieve. But if your customer is a pet food company, they will require an insect meal that has a very specific nutritional value. So you need a dryer, you need defatting equipment, and then you might need a laboratory services as well. And then in any case, you need some warehouse and support equipment like a pallet truck or pallet mover in any case. And those investments can start from some thousands of dollars, but I would say a minimal professional system, it's about $25,000 where it starts. And then the main running cost comes from electricity, labor. Then the question is that, do you actually make money, or do you have to pay for the bio waste or the substrate, which then of course defines many options for your output value potential. Typically, unfortunately, it goes that the more you get money from the input, the more limited value you get from the output in many cases, and vice versa. So, but there are some sweet spots where you actually can get money from handling a bio waste, and you still get a fairly good value from the larvae and frass. And then the very important part is that addition, you have two fuels that you use for the rearing. The other one is the bio waste, and the other one is the new neonates or the new larvae. And those eggs will cost money. It doesn't matter if you do it yourself or you buy them. And that's why the recipe and is very important. And if you calculate using our calculator, you can pretty much see that the egg costs are very important and significant part of the running costs. And you have to calculate and understand that what makes sense in your case. And then eventually you have to also add the depreciation and the loan payments for the purpose that you actually have a return of investment other than your salaries as well. And this is just a screenshot, which you can, if you go to mannainsect.com, you can see the calculator and gives you an idea that you can input these values, cost values to you, and how much do you want to upcycle, and then the output values, that how much would you get from the live larvae, and what is the organic fertilizer price. And with these, you can actually calculate what kind of combination makes sense and what has potential to be profitable.
Okay.
So Veri, you can continue from here.
Okay. How is black soda fly utilized in different continents in the future? So the perspectives for black soda flies are many, and as you could imagine from what we said before, the applications really go in different directions. Um, Animal feed prices are most likely just going to increase. Just a few weeks ago, we recorded that in some cases for the fish meal, the cost was almost $2,000 per ton. And the fish sector, the fish farming sector, is opening an eye on the black soda fly because despite the fact that the fish meals are better, they are not sustainable at all, and the availability is not always certain, and the cost is going up and up. So black soda fly represents a unique opportunity for having a stable supply of protein and other nutrient source. So there is a global fight over the soy, and the corn meals will make availability even more volatile. Uh, Climate change, wars, and we also have been experiencing the COVID time literally changed the global supply chain. And especially with the climate change, we expect in the coming years climate change and related water scarcity that corn and soy will not be available as they are now. And also in this case, unfortunately, the price might increase. And this is for those that operate in the black soda fly market is an advantage. Unfortunately, global wars, hostility will continue to disrupt food chains. Uh, Everybody knows about the war in Ukraine, but there are many other conflicts that interest entire countries or just specific regions, and unfortunately, they seem not to come to an end, and they influence the world supply chain. The world population is increasing. People demand for more protein, so more animal farming, and these increase the manure production. These increase the city organic waste production. So there will be always more bio waste available. Opportunities to pick for the black soda fly farmers. People want to buy and support more sustainable ways to produce the food. It seems like finally the audience are raising awareness and they are deciding to make conscious choices, and we can be quite sure that opting for black soda fly instead of soy or instead of fish meal is the most sustainable source in most of the cases. New results and applications are discovered for black soda fly larvae and frost. A lot of research fields are progressing, and results from several research institute, university, but also private companies are surprising us every day. We can even extract molecules that can mimic the semiconductive activity of some minerals that now are used in the computer and other electronics motherboard. This is just an example of what we can hopefully soon get from the black soda fly. So the opportunities are very big.
So yeah, where should you go from here? And of course, this is where we do want to also give our experience and solutions that. But there are things that is good that you will do beforehand. One is that to understand more your country and your area, because the difference between centralized big facility and small scale is that you should also, the efficiency and competitiveness is to be small scale, is that you are local and you make it possible to be to give a local solution with minimal middlemen in between, and that means that you are in a national level at the highest. So you should check and understand what is your situation in your country about soy, and what are the challenges in the feed, the animal rearers and growers, what are their biggest challenges, and what is the cost structure in your country, and also very, very importantly, what kind of biowaste sources are available to you. And then, like we said, also the legislation around using insects. And the good thing is that in many countries you can ask from the local officials and environmental government agency that what are their guidance on how you can use and what are the restrictions. And then also we urge you to check other companies and entrepreneurs doing rearing and selling BSF, and you can kind of either copy and see that, okay, what are they doing, what they found out, so that you don't have to go through all the things. But in many cases, I've found that there is a collaborativeness in this field because it's so small that there's no point of competing each other. It's better to learn from each other and then combine forces. But also, I think we've said it in many times, but just start learning rearing and breeding. Just do a micro, buy 10 boxes and go to YouTube and follow the webinars. There's other webinars also out there, and start testing what makes sense, because you will hear a lot of guidance on different things and they might be contradicting each other. And unless you have you've done it yourself, it's very hard for you to see what makes sense in your case. And then stay as flexible as possible. So invest into a fixed infrastructure or a different specific method of these as long as possible to allow that. And then, of course, as a salesperson, just go and contact chicken growers and feed companies in these and see what they want and what they're capable of. They can even surprise you and say that, okay, we are ready to accept live larvae or dried larvae. You don't need to post-process that. So even these can be found. And then last, of course, you need a business plan. You need calculations and metrics to convince first yourself and then convince the funder, whoever that is that a bank or a business angel or investor or a government. And in our case, how we can help you, and this is the small part of shameless promotion. We have developed in the 5 years we've been practicing this ourselves and then learning from our customers and cases. We have developed this fast track process, which starts in most of the cases, it starts with consultancy and training that we provide as cost efficiently as possible. And then for the rearing and breeding, we do provide and sell either lease or a purchase of a climatized smart containers where you can do rearing and even breeding, and you can modularly increase your scalability. And then we have different opportunities that we connect with in different areas to do the business. So please let us know if you need any help, and we're glad to send more materials and set up a telco as well. And I think pretty much we covered everything in 45 minutes. And yes, if Saverio, if you can check if there's any questions, we can cover at least as many as we can do in 15 minutes, and we can do a little bit overtime if there is still an interest.
Okay, I'm going through many messages. Some are very long. I hope I'm not missing anyone. But please, all of you have been here joining us today. Do not hesitate to share other questions we will be glad to answer you now, or you can email us privately.
Yeah, and I will put a link there. We would like, of course, feedback from everyone, and I put a link to a form that you can ask more questions, and we will come back over email as well. And then anything you want to give us feedback for the future webinars as well. So the link is in the chat.
Yeah. We are glad that today we are having attendees from all the continents. At least this seems like from the greetings and the feedbacks from Africa, Asia, Europe, and
Yeah, I'm just checking questions. We will this will be a recording, so if you want this presentation, everyone who registered will get an email afterwards with a link to this and the previous webinar, so you can go back and check if there was something you want to listen again or read.
yeah. And then this is I consider a very important base, but it's a general introduction for those who really convince themselves to switch from the curiosity of the black soldier flies to evaluating the business creation of a black soldier fly farm. We have other contents and other services that we can provide you.
Yeah, I'm looking here. So biowaste examples and biowaste cases, it's very hard to say, but I would categorize three in three buckets. One is whatever you will, or actually four buckets. One is industrial side stream in a local food company or food producer. Typically, the challenge with these is that they have hundreds or even thousands of tons coming, and in a small scale, that might be too much, an overwhelming case. So we have, let's say, found the best substrates directly from farms or in agriculture or in local markets where you sell the fruits and vegetables, and most of those which are not sold at the end of the day will be left as a bio waste, and they're typically like nicely some tons to tens of tons available and very high quality for the larvae. Then the other bucket is whatever you can find from, let's say, after human consumption, either it's homes or restaurants, especially, which is a mixed bio waste and which is excellent for the larvae to eat. You basically need to do just crushing and mixing to make it as homogeneous as possible. And then the final level is the manure option, which is plentiful, but also you have to test and see what can be made out of that, depending on the country and case. But typically the manure is already in the right format for the larvae, so it's very little that you need to do for the manure other than just have a recipe and weigh them nicely.
Yeah, and then there is somebody questioning what is the bio waste number one, and I would say Uka, that the bio waste number one is not the one that is the richest in nutrients, but is the one that is the most reliable, the one who gives you that certainty that you can rely on that source all year round. What do you think?
Yeah, it's like in Finland, in Oulu near Lapland, and I urge people to check where Oulu is in a map. We're not the biggest fruit and vegetable producers because we have 3 months summer, but what we do have is potatoes, and we have one of the best potato fields here in Lapland. And the potato, the good thing about potato example is that you harvest it once, but then you store it and it will survive the whole year. And the potato farmers typically store all their harvest, and then every month they package it directly to supermarkets, and they have about 10% waste because the potatoes are too ugly or too big or too small, but still completely valuable for larvae. And we got the local potato farmers, they brought us the potatoes and we crushed them and fed to larvae, and that was high quality food. So we, even in Europe, we were able to sell those larvae as an animal feed and as a fertilizer very easily. So all these kind of byproducts are very, let's say, valuable and useful. But then again, it depends a lot that what is available in your country and what are the seasons. Even grain and these are okay, but we try to, of course, avoid a lot of pre-processing, which typically is just a crusher that you need.
Yes. Other questions are coming, and this time is from Nigeria. Are there off-takers in Nigeria, and how to reach out or be your representative here?
Yeah, we've had a lot of contacts in the last years from Nigeria to Western Africa, and I haven't been there myself, but I've looked at a lot of YouTube videos, and of course I understand the economical difficulties there. But I also know that there are BSF farmers, and there's a lot of aquaculture in Nigeria, and micro and small fish farmers and chicken farmers. And there is a possibility in Nigerian weather conditions to start outdoors. So I would start outdoors and then convince, let's say, banks or loans, or there are, I think, like organizations like World Bank to give a micro loan and get started on that. But there is definitely like the BSF larvae and chickens are match made in heaven. And I think there's a lot of chicken rearing and fish rearing. With fish, there's some fish that it's very well suited, but not all fish species like larvae, especially as is live.
Okay. We have another question. Maybe it's not exactly centered on black soldier flies, but I believe we can give at least our point of view on this subject. What are your precautions on preventing or dealing with the viral outbreaks in the populations? So I would say that we as a black soldier fly related professionals, we cannot do a lot with the virals, but in my idea, there is that if we help the system to generate more nutrient dense food and providing a protein source that it's black soldier fly that includes also other nutrients. Actually, black soldier fly are also known to be a good source of molecules that stimulate the immunity system. In some pet shops, you can even find some supplements black soldier fly based. And so if you treat well if you farm well your animals, eventually you will receive also more nutrients in your dish. And the same is for the use of organic fertilizers rather than inorganic or other source of nutrients for the land that I cannot imagine now. But of course, we enhance the organic farming. And from this point of view, we're quite sure that black soldier fly can only be of help. Uka, you add something if you want.
Yeah, and what regards to, let's say, other, I would call them, pesticides when you are rearing black soldier fly. I mean, fruit flies are the most harmless, but one of the most annoying ones. But then you also have bigger animals who like larvae, and there might be, let's say, contamination or even mortality in the larvae. Of course, that was one reason why we developed the container, which allows you to separate your rearing into different islands, which don't directly, cause a mass extinction if you happen to catch something. The other is that we've always preferred at the end a batch method where you give food once to larvae, and then when you load the container and space, you load it once, and then you close the doors, and that allows to very much like containerize also the batch and the whatever possible pesticides there are. Typically, black soldier fly larvae always wins at the end, no matter what it is, fruit flies and these. But if you constantly in the same space add more food and you have like a continuous process, then the fruit flies happily move to the next food where there's small larvae that don't do anything yet, and then mate there. So that's one way we got rid of also these kind of, let's say, challenges regarding the process itself. So we haven't experienced in a couple of years no mortality or any deaths. We used to have them when we did continuously and actually fed multiple times the larvae, same larvae in the same dish. Then we actually got many challenges.
Yeah. I remember another question regarding the safety in the black soldier fly farming came from the first webinar, and I invite everybody to contact us for watching the previous webinar because it like the questions we received were very important, and it was a pleasure to answer all of them. Again, with the container system or with any kind of batch black soldier fly rearing system, also for the characteristic of the black soldier fly that well contains disease spreading, every black soldier fly farmer can feel quite sure that is operating in the best of the way. At the end, if you leave that organic matter abandoned in the environment, you can be sure that will be the site where pathogens propagate and then can spread and can carry disease. So I think it's a good way. It's always a good thing to give some organic waste to the black soldier fly. And proceeding with the questions, how do you store bio waste on site before making your feed substrate?
Yeah, I think that's something that depends on what you can find. In the case of potatoes, they were very easy because they came full, and potatoes are, they survive weeks even in bad conditions, as long as you don't put, like 35 degrees Celsius and sun. But typically what you want to do is you want to get to a level of bio waste that you can utilize within a same day or next day. Yes. Or within a couple of days, and you don't want to have it like hanging around for a long time unless you do fermentation or something like that. Exactly. With it. So that's another thing that you should that's why it's good to start with small, that you can test a procedure of doing 10 kilos or 100 kilos a day or every second day and kind of see what process makes sense. And then you multiply on that to make sure that you don't get swamped with a lot of material. And that's why, of course, the challenge with the outdoor rearing is that at certain point, you have to negotiate with Mother Nature, and Mother Nature doesn't tell you what it's planning too soon. And that might leave you in a situation where it's going to be a very rainy week and you lose half or most of your breeding capacity example, which means that you only have 10% of the capacity to rear, but you still get the same amount of bio waste. And I've seen and heard many of these challenges in these cases. So that's why it's good to start small and kind of really understand the variation in the capacity and in your rearing process, that you become comfortable of accepting certain amount of bio waste per day.
Yeah, as we were saying before, the quantity matters, but the frequency, maybe it's even more important for many businesses. Then if you have a space availability, then if you are dealing with a specific substrate that doesn't provide you any kind of alteration, because then it becomes a pre-digestion, can be a fermentation that helps the characteristic of your substrate, but in some cases it brings pH and nutrient loss, and so you basically obtaining less from maybe a premium substrate. So always consider that. And continue with the questions. Will a decentralized model likely work profitable compared to a central model if you are producing at scale?
That's a good question, and then the question is, what does in scale mean? That I would say that, and that's why I in our slides what we have is, and we talk about it more in the previous webinar also, that we don't see a that only one way works, but what we promote is that a path from zero. What are the paths? So you don't have to go from zero to decide that you're gonna do a multi-million-dollar centralized facility, but you can start and then learn every step of the process to minimize the investments and the risks, and also your ability to get funding for the next round and in the bigger round. So how I see decentralized, definitely it's the advantage of decentralized model is that you have a fairly small scale production in one location, and the way you scale is not in one location, but that you have hundreds of small locations. The similarly, like you scale agricultural farms in Western world, and some places there are thousands of pigs, but in most cases there are some hundreds, but then there are hundreds of farms, and that brings resilience as well, and for you to utilize small sources. So I would say that decentralized model scales differently than a centralized model. And the idea of decentralized model is that it's a way to create an income and employment to even one person, and within the infrastructure that one person can handle and invest into. And you don't have to go immediately to employ tens or hundreds of workers. But if you have a source locally that has thousands of tons available there for years to come, then it makes sense to build a factory and a more centralized industrial model for BSF. So both have cons and pros, and I would say that both models and the whole industry is still young enough that you need to be flexible and find your opportunities and references.
Okay, so now there are two questions. We are actually having a lot of questions to answer. I thank you very much. Everybody is sharing his thoughts with us, and we are happy here to answer you. So briefly, what is your website where calculator is presented? The website is mannainsect.com, and you can visit our website and you will find the calculator. And another one is there a potential for CO2 savings compared to soy or fish meals? I would say definitely yes. If you consider that for the fish meal production, most of the times there are boats moving in the ocean and consuming a lot of fuel, activating processing systems that consume important amount of energy, and then there is the transportation that should be considered in many steps all around the world. So the CO2 emissions are quite relevant, I would say. And in the terms of the soy, today, soy monoculture plantation are considered as the number one enemy of the Amazonian forest. Soy is being planted for hectares and hectares in territories where before there was a forest. So if you assume that you are removing a forest, you are mobilizing the soil, which lose the capability to absorb CO2 and release eventually CO2. And you consider also all the fertilizer, all the transportation, the fuel, the artificial chemicals, and the pesticides, and everything is necessary for keeping this soy plantation up and running, compared to a decentralized model that in 1 mile transforms immediately the organic matter with the black swordfly use. Well, I feel quite confident that there is a huge advantage in terms of CO2 saving with the black swordflies. Another
Yeah, we
question.
actually, just to say,
Yes.
we did calculation by a professional environmentalist, and in the context of our container, which is about 20 tons of soy equivalent larvae, it is 200 CO2 tons that you can remove compared that you would use soy in the place. In, of course, taking into consideration that you are using a bio waste that is not already feedable to animals directly, which otherwise wouldn't make sense to feed the larvae. And then in our case, actually the container itself uses so little power, which can be even solar powered, that you're practically the running of container is about 5 to 10 CO2 tons a year, even in worst case, and it's about 220 CO2 tons that you save if you replace and don't buy that soy meal. So there are possibilities to save that. Then it depends on, is there a source of income from the carbon credits, or a source of loans based on the fact that you are removing climate impact instead of contributing to it.
Okay, thank you so much for adding this note. I almost forgot that you made this kind of studies, and that there is a slide somewhere that immediately pictures all the advantages of using a Manna container. We didn't put in this presentation, but maybe in the next one. That's very emblematic. Okay, proceeding with the questions. Very long and articulated question, but in brief is, do you believe that African black swordfly companies can be competitive with soy and fish meal, and also with the European big black swordfly companies in the near future?
Yeah, it's simple. Yes, it's. I think the challenge we have in Europe and in countries where there's a very let's say a bureaucratic legislation around food, and we're like over hygienic what comes to food. The problem is that we don't understand insects as its own category and what they do benefit. We basically, our legislation treats insects as we treat pigs and chicken, and all the animal health and hygienic and what kind of substrates can be fed and so on limits companies working in these areas a lot, and they actually have to buy a very high quality substrate, which is practically, it's not even a bio waste in any form, and that causes the prices to be fairly high. And how I see it in African context and in in Asian context, like in India and Indonesia and Malaysia and these countries, is that the infrastructure in itself can be lower, but also that these countries and in these areas, the insects are understood and appreciated as a separate species, meaning that they actually can use the whole purpose is that we use bio waste and something that is not usable otherwise, and use it locally. With the globalization, the challenge is that even in, let's say, lower income countries, the cost of soy is about the same that we pay here in Finland or in United States, or these actually even more, because Europe put so much subsidies into soy that we actually our soy costs less money for us because we pay through the taxes. But then the potential of substrate is actually much more wider. So I definitely see that this is a bigger opportunity. Then I wouldn't kind of maybe suggest to competing by exporting larvae from Africa then to European markets. That might be a bigger challenge to do. I don't have experience on that, but I would definitely promote always locally use the BSF outputs anyway.
Okay, so
I think we can do one more questions, and I think we just have to
I see
stop.
two. No, it's unfortunately three more question. I really don't know, but please, I invite everybody to contact us on the social networks or by email, whatever you prefer. We will be glad to answer you. And
Yeah.
okay, so there are other questions on how to actually what to do with the dead flies, like asking if we sell them.
Well, you can utilize. So the good thing about the whole black soda fly rearing process of you have two inputs. You have the bio-waste, and then you have the neonates, or the small larvae, and your output is basically larvae and frass. But if you do breeding, your output also is the dead flies and then the pupa shells, and both pupa shells and dead flies have a lot of chitin and then protein in them. So you can either grind them as its own product, or you can grind them to frass, or as part of the protein source, depending. But I wouldn't waste them either, or consider them like a trash that you have to take care of. But then it depends on your breeding process, on how you can handle and clean. We have our own, and that's part of our training, is that in our training we go over the business models, and we have like calculators and business models to help the customers understand what are possible and what are the metrics. But also we go over our rearing and our breeding processes very in detail of how we have done it for several years in a small scale, and let's say commercially viable even in Finnish context, where you can imagine we have $15 per hour a typical labor cost here in Finland. So we wanted to make it work even in this context. But there's a contact form in our website also to contact us. We send more materials, and then we can have a telco and go from there as well. And this and the previous webinar will be shared as a link to all registered afterwards.
Okay, so we will answer to the questions privately, directly by mail, as you prefer. And I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. And we are looking forward to see you also at the next webinar. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, and I'm hope please connect me and my colleagues also through LinkedIn, where we are active, and we're happy to ask any questions, and then also understand you. We've had a lot of telcos in different parts of the world, but we haven't still talked to everyone, and we do want to talk to everyone and understand their situation, and then see how we can help. And thank you. The next webinar will be in about a month from now, but through our website you can see the schedule for every month. And then I would like to also say that there is another set of webinars from EndoConnect coming, which I also urge you to join, which kind of cover the same kind of topics that we have, but from different point of view, and there's different experts in those, and we're very happy that to promote other companies and other people who provide free webinars in BSF.
Okay.
Yeah.
So see you in 1 month.
Yeah.
Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.